worked on the basis of a very nice idea of Daniel Martin, or Daniel Martin, probably is how he pronounced his name, who suggested that you could ask ChatGPT to act as the host of a radio show that would interview you about a text that you had read. So I slightly adapted his prompt to make it more generic, so it could be used by students for a wide variety of different texts or videos or audio. So this is the prompt I put in. I'm going to copy and paste a text. Based on the content of this text, I want you to take the role of a radio talk show host and interview me about it so that my answers are mostly based on this content. The conversation should last about 3 minutes, and you must also ask me follow-up questions based on my answers. You should also make comments in response to my answers. Here's the text. Start the interview when I say OK. It turned out that it was more like 8 minutes rather than 3 minutes, but it didn't really matter. I found a text that I thought would be interesting. It was about a Spanish couple called Victor Penasco and Maria Josefa Perez de Soto, who were a very rich couple who travelled on the Titanic. I'd already heard about this story before, that's why I chose this one. So I then pasted this text after the prompt, and you could see it was pretty long. And then when I said OK, and I spoke the word OK, the conversation began using voice, not text. Of course, there is a written record as well here. Daniel mentioned that sometimes the ChatGPT interviewer cuts you off, but that can be dealt with by keeping your finger pressed on the little circle that says it's listening. As long as you keep your finger on that, it won't interrupt. So let's listen to the result, because what I did was I used a second device to record the interaction between the Vale host, the voice I chose was Vale, and me. Here it is.
Great. So, Victor and Maria Josefa were already on an extravagant honeymoon when they made the last-minute decision to board the Titanic. What do you think drew them to the voyage? Was it just the glamour of the ship, or might there have been other reasons?
I think it was the most exciting thing rich people could do.
That makes sense. The Titanic was a symbol of luxury and modernity, so for a wealthy couple like them, it must have seemed like the ultimate experience. But for Mina, the maid had a bad feeling about it, and Victor's mother had warned them not to travel by boat. Do you think they should have taken those warnings more seriously?
Yeah, obviously. As a result of what actually happened, it was a mistake to take the boat.
Absolutely, hindsight makes it clear. But at the time, they probably didn't think anything could go wrong. Now, on the night of the disaster, Femina was the first to sense something was off. What do you think made her react differently from Victor and Maria at first?
I think she heard something strange, and she was worried. She wanted to investigate, and in fact it was Victor who in the end investigated and found out what was happening.
She noticed something was wrong first, but it was Victor who went to check. When he realised the ship was sinking, he panicked and rushed back to the cabin. That must have been a terrifying moment. If you had been in their position, how do you think you would have reacted?
I don't think I would have been calm and collected as Victor was later on. It was only initially that Victor panicked.
That's a good point. At first he panicked, but then he seemed to accept what was happening and tried to comfort Maria. It must have taken a lot of strength to say goodbye like that. Do you think Maria truly understood in that moment that she would never see him again?
No, I'm sure she was optimistic and thought that he would be one of the men saved.
That's very possible. She might have believed he would find another way off the ship. But when she was in the lifeboat, reality must have hit hard. The Countess of Roths tried to comfort her, but do you think anything could have truly helped her in that moment?
No, not really helped her, but to have the Countess's arms around her, saying that she shouldn't worry, must have helped a little.
Yes, even if it didn't take away the pain, just having someone there must have given her a bit of comfort. Then, of course, there was the issue of Victor's death certificate. The family went to extreme lengths to resolve it. What do you think about their decision to buy a body?
Yeah, they had no money problems, so buying a body wasn't going to be a difficult thing to do financially. But morally, I think they were thinking of her, that she wouldn't be able to remarry until she was middle-aged, and she wouldn't be able to enjoy the benefits of having been married to one of the richest men in Spain either until she was in her early 40s.
That's true. They probably saw it as a practical solution, even if it was morally questionable. And in the end, it did allow her to move on with her life. She remarried and had children. Do you think she ever truly got over what happened that night?
No. I think those sort of experiences when you're young stay with you all your life, but you probably don't talk about them to your new husband, and probably only very occasionally to your children.
That makes sense. Some things are just too painful to dwell on, even if they shape who you become. And for Mina, who lived to be 98, must have carried those memories for decades too. Do you think she ever felt guilty about surviving when Victor didn't?
No, why should she feel guilty at all? I think women did realise that they were the ones who had the first chance to get on the lifeboats. That was the law of the sea.
That's a great point. It was just the way things were, women and children first. She was simply following the rules of survival. Looking back on the whole story, what do you think is the most striking or tragic part of it?
I think she was incredibly young. He was too, of course, but she was incredibly young, but she managed to remake her life. She lived to a ripe old age, had children, despite that horrific experience in her early 20s, I think.
Yes, it's remarkable how Mazeppa managed to rebuild her life despite the trauma. She was so young, and the loss of Victor must have been devastating. The fact that she still went on to live a full life is a testament to her resilience. It's a powerful reminder of how people can overcome even the deepest tragedies.
Yeah, I think that's true. There are so many stories about the people on the Titanic. Very few of the stories are well known, but I had heard about this before and had been very moved by it.
those stories that doesn't get as much attention as others, but it's incredibly moving. The Titanic holds so many personal stories of survival, loss, and resilience. It's amazing how each one of those individuals has a unique experience that adds a new layer to our understanding of that night. I'm glad we got to discuss this one.
Yes, thank you very much. I enjoyed that too.
You're very welcome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was a fascinating conversation.
Thank you and good night.
Good night. Take care.
You too.
Well, if you listen through to the end of that, I think you must agree that there is a certain charm about the way ChatGPT responded to what I said and continued the conversation. I would love to see a student doing this, possibly with a slightly simpler text. They would have to do what I did, which was to improvise completely. You got no advance warning of the questions, you just had to respond. And I think here the student would have to be very clear to keep their finger on the circle, which says listening, to make sure they weren't interrupted. Anyway, do try it out yourself. I would love to hear of somebody's students using this.